And you're watching LA City View, Channel 35, Our City, Our Channel. Namaste.
Morning, everyone. Today's Tuesday, February 19th, 2019. It's a regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll. For the next 3 weeks, I'm going to be wearing a hat. It's not out of disrespect for anybody, but I've just had too much sun on the top of my head. They're burning some stuff off, and if I were to take my hat off, all of you would head for the exits. So out of courtesy to you, I will keep a hat on for the next 3 weeks. Okay.
Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioner Soboroff, Bonner, and Figueroa Villa are present, and we have a quorum.
Okay. On the consent agenda items, do we have any commissioner comments on items 1A through 1F? No? Okay. We have public comment. We have public comments.
We do have one on 1A, sir.
On 1A, 1D, and 1E.
Yes.
So let's move B, C, and F. Sandy, thank you for moving that.
Moving A, B, C.
No. B, C, and F.
B, C, and F.
Yeah. Okay. Second. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? 3-0. So we have a comment card on item number 1A, 1D, and 1E. Let's
Yes,
start
sir.
with 1A.
1A, we have Mr. Herman.
And on D and E?
We have Michael Novick on D and Michael Novick on E.
Okay. Mr. Herman.
So, as the so-called E-Track rail system, whatever the Valley Traffic Advisory Council is used to, I find it offensive to reimburse an officer for the purchase of 8 pieces of E-Track rails. Why can't this department fund that prior to having an officer take out his credit card and pay for some bullshit that's not his responsibility, but other than to provide public safety? Does that make sense? Why are these rules you guys come up with constantly change? Why? You see this badass shirt I'm wearing? This is why they change. There's only one or a few left fucking Americans here who know what the fuck's happening in our small city.
Let's go back on topic, please.
Regarding the safety and transport of mini-cycles. What the fuck's that about? I didn't vote for mini-cycles. I voted for beat police patrolling, and becoming familiar with their so-called socialism activities in our neighborhoods, providing quality, safety, care, and unity, bridging fucking nigger white me to understand white nigger Jew Steve Soboroff.
That was your second warning. Next speaker, please.
I have 26 seconds.
No, you
sir.
don't.
We have no other speakers on this
Violation
item.
of Brown
Okay.
Act.
Do we have a motion for approval of 1A?
Motion to approve on A.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Let's go to item 1D. We have one speaker, Mr. Novick.
Yeah, item 1D is a donation of 2 Recon Throwbots XT for the benefit of the Metropolitan Division. So first of all, this is the same Metropolitan Division that we've been talking about for several weeks because of the racial profiling in their traffic stops, right? And so I don't think that's appropriate. I also don't believe that you should be accepting a donation of throwbots. I don't understand quite what that is, but I assume it's a robot that throws something. And I'm not interested in having any further RoboCops along with the drones and the rest of what you're getting. Finally, I think that you should, at the very least, defer this because it doesn't say who the donation is from. So I'm wondering who is donating these throwbots to the LAPD. And so I think you should either reject this entirely or put it off to your next agenda so you can provide the public with more accurate information about what they are and who's donating them.
It's all in the attachment. If you were to go to the attachment, you would see on the attachment, it says, answers every question that you've just brought up.
Well, why don't you say publicly what it is, because most people aren't reading the attachments. They're just getting the agenda.
It's all public. Okay, are you finished?
I'll reiterate, I don't think the Metropolitan Division deserves anything else until it's eliminated.
Okay.
So,
Sir, I'll be happy to address your concern. It's the Police Foundation is the donor
Okay,
of this,
once again.
and then secondly, the items allow us to look into an area that has a suspected individual who's maybe armed with a handgun or other offensive weapon without having to put an officer in peril. That Throwbot, is its a fancy name of basically a ball that has a camera on it that allows us to transmit just like you would see a GoPro or some other type. So the effort is to protect officers as well as avoid confrontation when possible.
Okay, nonetheless, the Metropolitan Division, I don't think has been cleaned up yet from their racial profiling, so I still think you should reject this donation. I think you should tell the Police Foundation to either dissolve itself or to give its money for other purposes such as education, housing, health care, and food for people who need it.
We have okay, thank you. You're up on item number E, but we have a motion for approval of 1D.
Motion to approve 1D.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, so that passes. We'll go to item number 1E.
Yeah, I'm just curious about this one. There's a difference between 1E and 1F. 1F says it's obsolete duplicate records. This one says it's relative to the request for authority to destroy obsolete records, and I'm just curious if you're destroying any records that should be made available under 1421. Is it 1421? I forget the number exactly, but the transparency on police misconduct and shootings that was passed by the legislature, and I think
Mr.
just
Tiefenk, you want to
approved
comment on
by-
our longstanding on the policy?
Sure, Mr. President. These documents are not anything that would be covered under the new legislation. Sure, they're just duplicates of old crime reports that are no longer needed. But they have nothing to
Just
do with
curious
any of the
about
documents that would be
discrepancy
released.
between 1E and 1F, because 1F says obsolete duplicate records, and E just says obsolete records.
But then it says duplicate official records after that. Okay. We have a motion for approval of 1E.
Motion to approve 1E.
Second?
Aye.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? 3-0. Okay, let's go to, is there an item that's being held? 2C, I think?
Yes, Mr. President, the department has requested that item 2C be removed from the agenda.
Okay.
Staff is not available to speak on the item, so we'll bring it back at the next available meeting.
Okay. Do we have any commissioner comments on the grant application in item number 2A, or request any report on that? Okay. Do we have
We
any?
do have one public comment on
Okay.
2A and 2B.
Okay.
We have Mr. Herman on 2A.
Okay. And on 2B?
Mr. Herman.
Okay. So let me go into 2B now. Do we have any commissioner comments or request any report on the grant application for 2B? Okay, Mr. Herman, you can do 2A and 2B. 2C we're holding.
What are internet crimes? At one point or another, internet crime is an activity and incidents where not only the public, but police officers engage in their privacy at home to view children's naked little bodies.
Off topic.
This is dealing with internet crimes. Isn't a
this is
crime
regarding a
against a
grant
child on the
application.
internet a crime? And just simply because we have a grant application, sometimes those awards don't go to the internet victims, especially against children, because the victim needs additional due process and hearing. because they don't know why their rights were violated simply because
Mr. President, the speaker's off
Internet
topic.
is
This is
open
about
to
a grant
all.
application.
That was the second.
On which
second
one?
warning. So let's go to item number 2B, please. We'll start the clock for 2B.
well, doesn't the Brown Act state that we have the full
In fact,
time?
let's move approval of 2A.
Oh my God, this gentleman
Move
is
approval of
something
2A,
else,
please.
folks.
We have a motion for approval
This is
of
why the
2A.
Brown Act is fucked up in Los Angeles.
Second? Yeah, okay. All in favor?
Glad he showed, I'm glad he
Okay,
showed
we'll
his
go to
colors.
2B now.
I thought you said the 2C was closed.
We're going to 2B.
Oh,
2C,
2B.
yeah, 2C is extended.
Just testing your mind, bro. Relative grant application now for 2018 through 2020 intellectual property enforcement program. Now, what is intellectual property? Could it be devices like your walkie-talkies or your patrol car that you allow cadets to drive off at any time of the fucking day to go get you lunch? Is that intellectual property? When you allow children to navigate our hardware to satisfy the status quo of the LAPD for simply enforcement programs. Why isn't Ms. Decker here? Why isn't Ms. Decker here?
Off topic?
No, she's a part of this commission.
Off topic.
And she's aware of
come
what
back
the
during public
fuck
comment and flap about all
intellectual
that stuff,
property
but-
really is because she came from Washington, Soboroff.
Last warning.
So as long as there's a body and a commission, I can simply, on the task of the Brown Act, bring up criticism based on my view and personal allegations against fucking white nigger Jew like you.
Speaker's off topic, Mr. President.
We have no other comment cards on 2B.
Motion for approval of 2B. Second, all in favor? Anyone opposed? It's 3-0. Okay, item number 3 is the report of the chief. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. First of all, I'd like to go over significant events, and I'm going to address an in-custody death and 2 officer-involved shootings, and then some other matters involving events occurring across the city, as well as my travels. So, first, as to an in-custody death on February 12th at about 3:25 in the afternoon in the area of Hollywood Freeway and North Alameda Street. We had a uniformed California Highway Patrol officer observe a pedestrian on the freeway. The officer stopped his vehicle in the middle of the southbound lanes and detained the pedestrian, later identified as Oscar Javier Rojas, and moved him to the south shoulder of the freeway. An off-duty uniformed LAPD lieutenant observed the CHP officer and stopped to assist him, or assist the officer. The CHP officer asked the LAPD lieutenant to guard Mr. Rojas, who was handcuffed, so the CHP officer move his vehicles out of the traffic lanes. When the CHP officer returned to his vehicle, Mr. Rojas attempted to flee from the LAPD lieutenant, who took Mr. Rojas to the ground. The CHP officer returned to assist the LAPD lieutenant, and Mr. Rojas began to foam blood from his mouth, what appeared to be blood, and a rescue ambulance was requested to respond for the medical emergency. The CHP officer and LAPD lieutenant attempted life-saving measures. The fire department responded to the scene and also attempted life-saving measures, but to no avail, and Mr. Rojas was pronounced dead at the scene. Our Force Investigation Division, as well as the CHP Special Investigation Team, responded and are handling the investigation. We had senior command officers on scene, and as well as the Inspector General's office being notified. Relative to 2 officer-involved shootings that occurred on the 14th of February, the first occurred about 3:25 in the morning in the area of 6th Street and San Julian. It was about 3:25 in the morning when an off-duty, plainclothes detective was a pedestrian around 6th and San Julian Street. And he became involved in a physical altercation with an individual later identified as Mr. Michael Wise that resulted in an officer-involved shooting. The off-duty detective sustained significant head trauma, and Mr. Wise sustained a gunshot wound. The off-duty detective and Mr. Wise were separately transported to a nearby hospital where they were both admitted for their injuries. The Force Investigations Division responded, as did our Robbery Homicide Division and the Los Angeles District Attorney's rollout team, as well as the Inspector General's office being notified. That investigation is still continuing as to the facts and circumstances of how this detective found himself there and how this altercation and resulting officer-involved shooting occurred. Relative to the second officer-involved shooting that same morning, at about 6:51 in the morning, uniformed officers assigned to transit services was working a footbeat on the mezzanine level at the 7th Street and Figueroa Street transit station, the Metro Center, when they observed security personnel engaged in an altercation with an individual armed with a knife. The officers utilized a taser with that individual armed with a knife that proved ineffective, and the incident escalated, resulting in an officer-involved shooting. Los Angeles Fire Department personnel responded and declared the individual deceased at the scene. A knife was recovered from the scene. There were no officers injured during this incident. The identification of the male Hispanic individual that was involved in this altercation is a Mr. Wilfredo Hernandez. Again, Force Investigation Division responded, as well as the District Attorney's rollout team, and Inspector General's office was notified. Relative to some events of this last week, I want to comment on first this past weekend. I was absent last Tuesday from the commission meeting. I attended the Major City Chiefs winter meeting in Washington, D.C., where we met there with a number of federal law enforcement leaders, as well as leadership from major cities from across Canada and the United States, discussing various issues involving crime, criminal justice reform, as well as terrorism. We announced a threat prioritization listing that detailed for the first time across the United States and Canada the top 5 issues by agency as well as by region. This was done in a manner that I think will allow and promote better coordination of resources, as well as an understanding of challenges to our respective communities across this country. Additionally, this past Saturday, I attended at the Islamic Center of Reseda. I spent a couple hours with young Muslim youth that were there, taking questions and providing insight and perspective relative to law enforcement, as well as the criminal justice system here in Los Angeles, and just various societal issues that these young people face as they get ready for a responsible future. I want to thank the Islamic Center of Reseda, the leadership there, for bringing this group together and giving us an opportunity to kind of eliminate the mask, if you will, or the veil that sometimes happens when we don't have a chance to talk and spend time with it together. The 2 last issues I'd like to address is over the weekend, we saw the continued cold snap, as well as rains and weather, sometimes known as winter, but in Los Angeles, this has been unique for us. And the tragic side of this is that over the weekend, with these cold temperatures, particularly in concert with the rain, we found 3 individuals that we know of today that were homeless, that died. And what role the winter, cold weather, and extreme conditions played is unclear. But I'm proud of the men and women of LAPD, as well as with LAHSA and with our Unified Homeless Resource Center, as they continue to ensure that our officers and others were doing outreach and engagement with people experiencing homelessness and encouraging them to seek cold shelters. That work continued through the weekend, and it continues including today. This speaks to, yet again, one of the challenges of the extreme circumstances in which people who are experiencing homelessness find themselves in. And that is, without shelter, it can present severe and grave conditions for their survival. Lastly, yesterday afternoon, it's been widely publicized, there was a triple homicide in the Porter Ranch area of Devonshire in the San Fernando Valley. I actually responded to the scene, as did our robbery homicide and various resources from the Operations Valley Bureau. That investigation has continued through the night and to today. We are quite limited as far as the amount of information we're providing, other than to what has been released at this point, is that this attack, this loss of life is severe. It is a gruesome scene, and one that will continue to work tirelessly to identify individual or individuals responsible for this horrific loss of life. And with that, I'll move over to our crime. Picture for that was those homicides did increase. The overall year to date to 25 homicides versus 36 homicides last year. As of this last Saturday, we were just under a 40% reduction in homicide victims. Overall rate of violent crime is down nearly 13%, 6 weeks into the year, which is a good start. And overall Part 1 crime is down 10%, with reductions in every category. So while these numbers are very thin still, in the sense of the first 6 weeks, we have, I won't take any victory laps on this. It is a good start to the year in the sense of seeing reported crime reduced in each of these categories. The officer-involved shootings for the year, with these two that occurred last Thursday, those are the first two of the year, and with one of those being a fatal. The year-to-date numbers this year versus last were 2 officer-involved shootings this year, 6 officer-involved shootings last year. The 4-year average is just under 7 shootings for the year. And fatalities, 1 fatal this year, 2 fatals last year, with a 4-year average of being just over 2. Our traffic stats, we've had 24, as of the 9th of February, we've had 24 fatal traffic collisions versus 31 a year ago. Total DUI-related fatals and serious injuries were 8 versus 7 the year before. Hit and run, total serious injuries and deaths, 24 this year versus 33 last year. Motor vehicles versus PED, we've had 13 fatalities as of the 9th of February already. Now, that number was 19 last year, but that is just, again, continues to strike the severity that that are traffic collisions involving pedestrians. More than half of our fatals in the city are pedestrian fatals in the start of this year. I'm happy to report that we've had 0 fatalities with bicyclists involved, and we are seeing an overall reduction in the serious injury bicycle collisions as well. Moving over to sworn personnel and civilian on payroll, we're at 10,096 sworn personnel on payroll. This morning we started a new class of 49 new recruits in the academy, which is a good sized class. We have 3,007 sworn civilian personnel on payroll, 386 reserve officers, 1,428 cadets. And that concludes my remarks. I'm happy to answer any questions the Commissioner might have.
Commissioner questions of the chief? Okay. Commissioner?
Yeah, I wanted to go back briefly to the visit in, was it Washington?
Yes,
D.C., I believe, and you mentioned the effort to identify the top 5 issues facing various departments. Could you, I don't know if that's been something that's yet to come or has already been completed at the session, but if you could preview what your response was or is or will be.
Ours was gun violence being the top issue, gangs, decentralized and centralized, overall drug-related or drug influenced crimes, meaning property crime, crimes that are committed by individuals who have a narcotic addiction or circumstance, and then lastly, the opioid abuse. So in Los Angeles, our prioritization largely masks or matches that of the region. There is variation across the country. For instance, the opioid addiction and the tragic impact that is having upon the population is much stronger or higher of a priority in the East Coast and in the Midwest than we see here. However, it is moved up to number 5 on us because 2 years ago we were seeing little, if any, of it. However, today we are seeing, we're beginning to see evidence of opioids, particularly fentanyl, showing up in our streets and resulting in overdoses.
But by the way, I counted 4. Was it because the
centralized
and decentralized? That's 2?
Yes.
Okay.
What happened with, and one of the points that we came from this was there was a lot of confusion regarding what is a centralized gang versus a decentralized gang. One of the issues that in other parts of the country are facing is gangs here in Los Angeles are generally or oftentimes are well organized in the sense of the Mexican Mafia, the Crips, Bloods, sets that are historic, multi-generational. And yet we also have decentralized, where taggers or individuals that are that form a loosely structured gang, a small group, but not having centralized control or influence by someone, say, the Mexican Mafia or that type. So the decision from the chiefs was to consolidate that because it ended up giving people, as they're trying to break prioritization, it was confusing.
And how was this this list developed or devised?
So each of the, there's approximately 69 major city chiefs, including a few from Canada.
Excuse me. So the list you described, was this the consensus of all of the various departments, or is this the LAPD?
The list I described was LAPD's top 5.
Yeah. Okay.
And
so
then it was there's a couple of jockeying of those 5, but basically it was those 5 items. The opioid across the national picture was higher in its threat, if you will, as challenge. How this was combined was each of the partner or each of the member agencies was tasked or asked.
We'll start with how was it developed from the department? So is this the chief's list representing LAPD, or is
Yes.
this the consensus
So
of
there's
command staff? Or
So there's 21. There were 21 subjects, including human trafficking, sex trafficking, domestic terrorism, cyber, those type of scenarios. And then, so that survey document or instrument was then sent out to the major agencies. Here in Los Angeles, we shepherded this through Chief Frank's office. He's my representative on the subcommittee that was responsible for this. And we then did our subject matter experts, polled them, and then it was reviewed through the chain of command, including my involvement, to validate, if you will, to make sure that it was not unduly influenced by a particular pocket of the organization that felt that their prioritization should increase. For instance, transnational gangs. There are people who, as they investigate that, which is a threat here in Los Angeles, would, in a conversation, stress just how much of a terribly pressing issue it is and how it needs more resources garnered to it. What we do with that is we have to prioritize, and we cannot be all things to all people. So the internal process was to normalize that with qualitative and quantitative information so that we're satisfied that this matched our perception. It's not to say that, and by the way, this information is available, and I'll provide it to the Commission. It's not to say that human trafficking is not important, or sex trafficking, or cyber. We know that cyber, for instance, is a very big and emerging threat in America. Counterespionage, counterintelligence. These are things that do exist as threats, but what are our top 5? And that's how this boiled up.
Does it necessarily reflect the things that the leadership is concerned about, or is there data that's also then reflecting the underlying urgency or priority behind the issues?
There are data points. For instance, as we look at the issues of cyber in contrast to a number of shooting victims. We had just over 1,000 shooting victims, 1,006 shooting victims a year to date in 2018. So while the economic challenge and what can be a challenge to our economy that cyber presents, I believe shooting violence and gun violence remains the top most pressing issue here in Los Angeles when we look at overall safety.
But last question is, you mentioned that the benefit of identifying the top 5 in this group is the opportunity to collaborate, and is that the thrust of the effort, or will there be anything more formal to it in terms of efforts to eradicate or address the priorities that have been identified?
So the meeting consisted of leadership, including the Deputy Attorney General, as well as leadership from the Department of Justice and Bureau of Justice Assistance and the COPS Office. As federal agencies and their directors and leadership, they look at this as yet another input for programming that at the federal level they identify in support of local agencies for local law enforcement for safety purposes. So it's a trend issue. It also allows us as a benchmark to look and have this today. And the idea is 2 to 3 years from now, be able to look back and say, how has that threat picture evolved or changed?
And by the way, I had one more. If you looked internally, does our or does the department's allocation of resources reflect these priorities?
Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any public comments on the chief's report?
Yes, sir. We have 11 comment cards.
Okay.
The first three, Michael Novick, General Dogan, and Mr. Herman.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that the lack of shootings or killings last month proved to be an anomaly, and that LAPD is once again shooting and killing people. The death in custody, I think, should rise to the level of a killing. If someone was taken down and then started spitting blood, I think that's something that needs to be dealt with differently. I'm very concerned about this last discussion about the major chiefs meeting and an attempt to sort of federalize local law enforcement in the United States through that mechanism of having the Department of Justice, so-called, of the United States, and the Deputy Attorney General strategizing with police chiefs around the United States about what their priorities should be. I think the priority in this city should be taking the police out of the business of killing people. I think that, for example, the city of Portland, the city just removed their police department from a joint terrorist task force with the FBI, and I think that's something that we should consider here, not just eliminating cooperation with ICE, but with all these repressive federal agencies. So I'm very concerned about that discussion, and I think it merits some further questioning besides by Mr. Bonner about what the LAPD is up to in that regard. And I think that there are a lot of other items that have appeared in the news this week that were not commented on by the chief, including the officer commander who is involved in the DUI apparently, or left his vehicle at the scene of a crash, and it turns out he's in the DROP program as well. And I think that a lot more probing questioning by the police commissioner is in order when the chief gives a report that's inadequate or that raises issues that require your attention.
General Dogon, Skid Row resident with LA Can. From Jones versus the city in 2005 to Fitzgerald versus the city to Tony Levan versus the city to Carl Mitchell versus the city of Los Angeles. With LAPD leading the charge has done nothing but criminalize tents and houseless Angelenos who are forced to live in the public right-of-way because the city has failed to ensure housing is equally built for everybody. LAPD is not social workers. You're not housing developers, and your homeless outreach services are all failures because it's outreach to criminalization, like your HOPE teams. An example of that is in the case of Charlie Africa, who was approached by 5 LAPD cops who ended up shooting an unarmed homeless man. A shooting this commission and the Chief Beck at the time justified. You even promoted the Martinez to senior lead. You promoted this man to senior lead to watch us after he wrongfully murdered one of us in our own community. But now here it is again, another tent shooting. And the report that you gave, what you just testified, ain't what the witnesses on the block. Come on, our LA Cans Community Watch team, we go out and document everything happening in our community. And what you just said was not what the witnesses on the block say. It wasn't no jogging by. The man was in a tent. Now, what he was doing in a tent at that time, and he from 77 Division, that's the $1 million question. All right? But this commission, like Charlie's Africa, you're gonna rubber stamp it. You're going to justify it. But just like across the street, when across the street, got found guilty in federal court. Martinez found guilty, just like this man going to be found guilty. But the bottom line is, you need to get out of the homeless crisis. You need to get out of the homeless situation. You don't have housing. You're not developers. Eliminate yourself from it. And then you eliminate yourself from lawsuits, and you eliminate yourself from here, we can come back and cut you out of here.
We have Mr. Herman, followed by Paula Miner, Adam Smith, and Gina Viola.
such a timely reaction to so-called public safety. But as we heard off of LAHSA 811 Wilshire Boulevard, the 7th floor, LA 90017, and you can always call 213-225-6581. That's housing authority. So why are the police conducting as housing authority? Why are you raiding people's tents when you have no fucking business to do your shit, what you do to people who are living in the street, living in poverty? Why is that? Why do we continue to use bad enforcement, poor judgment, and acquire such abuse to civilians simply because they're homeless? But yet you went up to Washington, Mr. Moore, asking what can we do to protect the public? Or what should we do about sex trafficking, like in CD6 with fat bitch Nuri, an elected official who traffics children under DBA, in which you guys here at your police permit panel commission bullshit give out those permits for niggers to pimp bitches. So get it right. You know what I'm talking about, T-Fank. You're so afraid to show up at your own police permit panel bullshit. Yeah, you. In addition to that, regarding traffic, people being killed, people daily are being killed in Los Angeles, one after another being mauled down by some idiot stuck on stupid, running them over and taking off instead of being responsible. In addition to that, Washington and you, Miss Decker, who got rejected from Washington, regarding guns and gangs, there's gangs all over. The city of Los Angeles is the biggest fucking municipal corruption gang.
Next speaker, please.
Paula Miner, followed by Adam Smith, Gina Viola.
My comments, Chief Moore, are about what you continue to talk about, which is community trust. And I think some of the recent publicity that has occurred about LAPD is damaging community trust. The one example I want to speak about is Jeff Nolte, one of the family members of someone who had been killed by an officer last year, called me and said, did you know that the officer who left his car, who wrecked his car and left it in Carson, was the overseer of a team that investigates officer-involved shootings? At that point, I did not know that. I did some research and I found out. Then I know later the publicity said before you guys could really begin that investigation, that person retired and entered into the DROP program. So this is an example of something that people in the community consider when you talk about community trust, when you talk about relationships. When LAPD has so many scandals, so many questionable actions, and they get covered over or they get interpreted by your so-called spokesman, Rubenstein, who sounds like a used car salesman. But when these kind of things happen, it does reduce community trust. When we have names going around that we really don't understand, but there's definitely a hint of scandal, names like Jorge Villegas, Nicole Meringer, Daniel Reedy, Isabel Villegas. These are instances that get a lot of publicity. I think that one of the things you could do to improve community trust might be to look at what's going on in your organization. LAPD is a paramilitary organization. People take orders from the top down. If you tell people not to do something, they won't do it. We know that in those kind of bureaucratic structures. As long as you allow that kind of behavior, it will continue. It will destroy community trust.
Good morning. Kind of echoing what Paula Miner said about community trust and Jeff Nolte. It's not just a indictment of you that he is in charge of these investigations. It's an indictment of this whole commission that's allowed. It's an indictment of Mayor Garcetti.
that Jeff Nolte's in charge of this. And as far as I know, Paula, I don't think he's retired. I think he's on leave, double dipping. But I don't think he's retiring yet, or I don't think he's retired yet. And yeah, when we think about community trust, this is a guy who, as you know, it's probably not all of them, but from what I can see on the internet, has been involved in 5 shootings himself, 2 of them fatal. The one in 1997, he got caught lying in a civil suit, which the city ended up paying the victim, who was unarmed. He said he was armed with a shotgun. He was unarmed, and he got shot by Jeff Nolte, who lied about it, and then this person got $2 million from the city. So this person who has a proven track record of not only shooting and killing Los Angeles residents, but lying about the investigations, lying to this police commission to get out of it, is the person that you put in charge of these investigations. I understand that a Captain 3 Al Pasos is the commander now for your according to your website, but you should tell your web designer that worked obviously very hastily, that he's still listed in his bio as the patrol division commander. So unless he's double dipping too, which I know you have a history of as well, but I'd at least update the bio. But it's pretty disgraceful that this dude, who has literally killed people, literally shot 5 people, and not even just like shot and killed people, because that's not bad enough. He's lied about it and got caught, and this is the guy in charge of the person that when people get shot by police, he's in charge of making sure the investigation is fair. That just doesn't make any sense to me.
The next speaker, Gina Viola, followed by Audrey George and Pete White.
It's going to be difficult for me to maintain my composure. I'm so angry and so exhausted from this process. Lots of bad press this week in the Times for LAPD, lots of it. And all I could think of was, wow, if only there was some oversight for the LAPD. If only some oversight existed for the LAPD, perhaps I wouldn't be reading these things in the paper constantly. Perhaps I wouldn't need to come to police commission every Tuesday morning to talk about this. What is wrong with your officers that they have to shoot and kill somebody with a knife? How bad do you have to be at your job? Off-duty officer in a tent on Skid Row. The first thing you're going to do is vilify Skid Row. I'm tired of this. The community is tired of this. You've got lots of bad press all the time. And let's get to Jeff Nolte. Let's do it. How can you have him investigating officer-involved shootings? Adam referred to it already. $2 million the city has already paid out for him, and now he's taking his retirement and on paid leave. And on paid leave. I don't even understand. I don't understand how we can sit and have civil discourse about how broken this is, about how racist this is. Community safety, the only people who feel safe with police are white people. Do you understand that? Those are the only people who feel safe with police around. That's it. True, that's true. But again, I'm sorry, I can barely hold it together. I'm just so angry. I'm so angry that there's no oversight, that this is a body that meets once a week and does absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing except waste money and time.
I first want to ask some questions about the community meetings that we've heard referred to today and some other days as well. These are not the ones that you are mandated based on your own promises to hold 6 times a year in the community. These seem to be other types of community meetings, and I want to know, how does one find out about them? Do we need some sort of engraved invitation, and how do we get those? How does it happen that a commander of the FID has accomplished so much in his career? Is it required to reach that level in your career to have filled some sort of quota? Is it that you had to have been involved yourself in at least 5 police shootings, 2 of them fatal? Is that a requirement? Is it required that to investigate use of force, you have to have at least been found to have lied on the stand under oath in at least one instance? You can't keep sweeping these things under the rug, and you won't be able to sweep under the rug that he drove his vehicle, crashed it, drove it at high speeds on the freeway, and then abandoned it. We're going to want to know why that happened, and we're going to want to see him fired. And this drop program, that's such an insult to the whole community to have somebody who's committed so much wrongdoing and be on paid leave and be eligible for the drop program. If we had a police commission that was truly an oversight commission, we wouldn't be up here, like Gina said, we wouldn't have to be talking about these things. They would never have been swept under the rug. Nolte wouldn't have become commander of the use of force division, the force investigation division.
The next speaker, Pete White, followed by Hamid Khan and Jonathan Foster.
Morning, sir.
Good morning, Pete White with the Los Angeles Community Action Network. So on the Skid Row shooting, the story has obvious gaps, but the Neighborhood News Network is working really quickly. So there were 2 people inside of a tent arguing at about 3 a.m. Obvious question, what was an LAPD detective doing inside of a tent on Skid Row at 3 a.m.? At some point, folks heard tussling inside of the tent in which has been described as a struggle. Question, what were they struggling over? And then 3 shots were fired. Folks in the neighborhood took cover, and the community was swarmed with LAPD officers. If I were a gambling person, I'd bet the detective was not on any sort of official business. I look forward to being proven wrong. Additionally, this is not the first time an off-duty LAPD officer shot a Skid Row resident. The name Dale Garrett should ring a bell. Mr. Garrett was killed by a detective, reportedly on lunch on the corners of 5th and Spring. The reason for the fatal shooting, shot in the back, by the way, changed about 3 times, but of course, robbery and a knife, that elusive knife was there. We made the LAPD interview witnesses, the same witnesses they attempted to remove from the scene. We forced a community hearing on the shooting, which was held in a packed venue on Spring Street. And ultimately, we helped the Johnny Cochran firm win a wrongful death lawsuit against the LAPD. You'll tell us to trust the process, a process created and maintained to absolve officers of any responsibility to our murders, a process that diminishes the value of poor Black and brown witnesses, pushing them away from murder shooting scenes, a process led by an Officer Nolte who crashed his LAPD vehicle and ran away from the scene, who has been involved in multiple murders in our communities. We don't trust your processes, and luckily state law now requires you to show your hand within 45 days of these shootings, a change forced by the community and not this group of overseers.
So let's try to bring it together as to what's going on, and we're talking about Valentine's Day. We're talking about the 14th. And I wonder what Matt Johnson would be thinking right now about the de-escalation that he'd been talking about, the whole training around de-escalation that Matt Johnson led and extolled on the virtues of de-escalation. And then here you go again, that you show up at the metro station, somebody's with a knife, and you shoot to kill, and you murder a person. I wonder what Matt Johnson will have to say that an off-duty cop from 77th Division, as that has been stated, repeatedly is doing at 3 a.m. behind Midnight Mission in a tent and getting into a scuffle. I wonder what Matt Johnson would have to say when you talk about Jeff Nolte, that even the Ninth Circuit said that his self-defense was not credible and awarded $2 million to the family of whom he had killed. So now what we are looking at, conspiracies, lies, murders, violence, harassment, intimidation, which is a tradition. I mean, this is, if I was to translate all of this, the language which people will hear is about conspiracies, lies, and murders. So what are you doing?
I mean, why are you here? And I think, I mean, I think a little bit differently because there can't be oversight. The idea, I think there's, and I really, and I hate to say this, but I will say it, that within white privileged America, there is this glorification of the police, and desperately people want them to do the right thing, but they can't. Something that is inherently flawed by design, it will never happen. You can try anything, you cannot. It won't happen. You can have all the oversights in the world because something that is there to enforce with a gun, something which is there with a license to kill, will murder. It will never, ever change. So Shane Goldsmith is not here.
Next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Jonathan Foster, followed by Melina Abdullah and a card that says Black Power.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Douglas Foster, and Father God, thank you for today. Father God, thank you for your son, Jesus, and protect everybody because they need protection. You know, I'd still like to make L.A. number one. Still pushing for that we hear out of L.A. something we don't hear in any other city, that they stopped shooting people here. I want to make L.A. number one, okay? Some people think that I don't love black people. It's my approach that is different. It doesn't exactly fit this group because I want to see you with head-to-toe body armor so you don't have to shoot anybody, and you've been told this and 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 told this, and it ain't happening yet. So you can't be number one. I acknowledge the 98% excellent service. All we can talk about is the 2% that we can't seem to get rid of. Okay, you got new people, you train them, and then they screw up. Now, I came again to speak about Jamil Shaw Jr. and the Special Order 40 that killed him that you have not gotten rid of. And if Jose Espinoza had been deported and we did have a wall, he wouldn't be able to come back over here and kill Jamil Shaw. He'd be alive today. Would we want a alive Jamil Shaw Jr.? The answer is yes. I've cried so much about this. I'd like to have a wall. I'd like you guys to do your job and bust the gang, but then we don't have any room to put them in. And then you're breaking families and all this kinds of stuff. And I wonder, why does anybody on earth want to shoot somebody else? Why does someone want to shoot somebody else, no matter what the problem is? So unless you're not really going to try to be number one, you're going to have all of this is just going to be up in your face all the time. And I support a lot of this, too. I want to say something about the laser program. They said they're putting people in a database that hadn't even broke a law. Well, why are you doing that? That's wrong.
Melina Abdullah.
So I just want to raise a couple of questions, and maybe you'll feel compelled to take action, probably not. You all keep putting out these statements about what happened in police shootings and police killings. And at the same time, when families request information on police shootings and police killings, you say you can't release information because they're under current investigation. So how dare you use your PR unit to spin stories about what happened while denying families and denying community information on those same shootings and killings? I think that is hypocritical, and it's also a misuse of our resources. We demand the disbanding of your PR unit because your PR unit...
I'm sorry, can you hold her time, please? So do you have a specific case that you want to reference? Because I'll make sure our family support unit meets that person.
It doesn't matter about the
meeting.
Every single one. How about we can do Grishario Mack? We can do Albert Ramon Dorsey. We can go on and on.
Okay,
People,
so we'll
Waukesha Wilson's family has requested information. All of Eric Rivera's family has requested information. I'm still responding to his question, but my time is ticking. Okay, so I have about 20 seconds that needs to be restored. Yeah, you can have 20
more seconds.
Okay, so all of those lists, I can write down the names for you. They've all requested information. Those information requests have all been denied.
Okay.
The other issue I have is your so-called community meetings. that you are locking the people who are most involved in holding police accountable out of, that you're inviting select folks who you can point to be your cheering section. That's an unethical kind of community space. If you want to have honest conversations with community members, you want to talk about going to South LA, I live in South LA. We live in South, all of us who live in South LA, raise your hands. Why are we not invited to those community meetings? I'll tell you why. It's because you want to roll out this conversation about so-called community policing that is nothing more than putting police in our neighborhoods that keep us vulnerable, keep us surveilled, allow for brutalization, and allow for the killings of our people. And so I think we need to have richer, fuller conversations with real community members who understand that just by putting the word community in front of policing doesn't mean that it's safety.
Next speaker, please.
And the final speaker is the one who filled out a card for Black Power.
You ain't got to whisper that. There's no secret that Black Power still exists. I know this commission is operating under the mechanism of white power and white supremacy. When you can sit here and, yeah, that's right, when you can sit here and talk about trust and transparency, and you got a black police officer sitting right here that I personally saw lie on the witness stand, and yet stand here with some type of moral substance. This place lacks all types of moral substance. Y'all are living human examples of living the dilemma of trying to say one thing but living out another thing. This black man right here, look at him good. Look at him like he owe you money. Look at him real good. Stood on the witness stand, protected by judges and the court system, protected by the LAPD, wittingly and knowingly lied on the witness stand. Where is he standing? Is this police officer fired? Is this police officer received any type of punishment? No. Where is he standing? He's standing to protect another liar. The system and the culture of LAPD policing is corrupt as shit because the living examples of it is right here. And a police officer is found inside of a tent. There's no question about what was going on there. The question is, how do we keep the LAPD from lying and continue to cover up and keeping a tradition of corruption alive? That's the real question.
Okay, we're going to go to public comment now.
We have 10
Sir, your
comment
time's
cards.
up. We'll call you back for public comment. Okay, so we'll call you back when it's time for your public comment.
We have
Next speaker.
We have 10 comment cards.
Sir, I'm going to ask you to sit down now. I'm going to ask you, will you please sit down?
The first three: James Olson, Roy Stone, and
How many
Michael
public
Novick.
comment cards you have?
10, sir.
Okay. Mr. Olson?
Call back truth. Call up justice. My name is Jim Olson, and I have a complaint against the commanding officer of the Police Newton Division. Because of the 2-minute time limit and the length of the complaint, I cannot say it, so I put it in writing in an envelope.
Thank you, sir.
I have one here for President Steve. I have another one, a copy of it, for Chief Michael Moore. Could you please give them to them?
Thank you.
I also have a third one regarding corruption within the council members Kern D. Price. This I would like to give to Eric Garcetti, Mayor, but I believe Chief Michael Moore interacts with Eric Garcetti quite often, so if you could give it to him and he could give it to the mayor, I'd appreciate it. The reason I don't mail these things is because the Newton Police Division intercept my mail anytime I address something to people that are as important as all of you with my return address, because they will not, they don't want me to communicate any of this stuff to you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Roy Stone, followed by Michael Novick and Gina Viola.
I'm Roy Stone, a retired librarian representing the Librarians Guild. Representing the Librarians Guild, whose leadership is attending a previously scheduled steward training today. I'm here to tell you of an outrageous situation that we hope will never recur. On January 20th, a patron at the Mid-Valley Branch Library was causing a disturbance. The librarian on duty appropriately told him he had to leave. And when the librarian went to call LAPD, the suspect followed him and hit him from behind, knocking him to the ground. The suspect left, and LAPD officers arrived about 25 minutes later. The suspect is reported to live in a homeless encampment very near the library. But it was not until weeks later, when the suspect was seen by library staff at the Granada Hills branch, that LAPD officers were able to apprehend him, but they chose not to do so. They gave him the library suspension letter, which he threw in the trash, but the assault and battery that he committed was ignored. They did not even get his name so that the librarian could file charges. At this point, the suspect has still not been apprehended, even though he has never left the area. The Librarians Guild is frustrated and bewildered as to why he cannot be found. We're requesting that all resources, not just the Special Services Division, but including LAPD officers, be made available to find and arrest this person. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, if you would, please see Deputy Chief Green there. We'll make sure that we get that your concerns addressed.
Michael Novick.
Mr. Smith, when it's your turn to speak will be the public comment? Okay? Okay. Well, that's your last warning, sir.
The simple solution to the issue that's been raised about your fake community meetings is to have these meetings out in the community. You should not be meeting here inside the police administration building. You should be meeting in Skid Row. You should be meeting in the West Valley. You should be meeting in South LA on a weekly basis, not an imaginary 6 times a year. So I think that you're derelict in your duty. People have used other terms besides oversight. I think it was Pete White said overseer, which of course is somebody who enforces a system of slavery, which we understand that the mass incarceration of black people in this country is a badge and an incident of slavery, which has been outlawed under the Constitution. The other term that people use is this is the Overlook Commission. You overlook the crimes and killings carried out by the LAPD as opposed to providing so-called oversight. So I think that I'm curious because I missed the end of the last meeting, but I believe that you did an evaluation of the chief, and I'm wondering what your evaluation was. So if you've issued something publicly about that, I'd appreciate knowing where the link to that is. And I think that the fact that you have not responded to anything that's been said to you here, I understand this is not, you don't see this dialogical, but the chief is willing to engage. The chief will ask questions and answer questions. And so I think that you need to reconsider how you deal with public comment and how you respond to it, as opposed to just rubber stamping the item on your agenda with unanimous approval, which you do time after time. I'm not sure why we all come here exactly, except that I think maybe some people in the city watch this on.
Gina Viola, followed by Mr. Herman and Jonathan Foster.
I don't have much to add what I said before, except that I do want to add, get police out of schools. The schools do not need policing. Stop criminalizing students. Get police out of houseless folks' business. You know, the homelessness situation has increased steadily as the police presence has increased steadily. The two are related. The LAPD does not need 54% of the city's operating budget. This is what is broken. This is what needs to be fixed. If you are to be of any service as an oversight commission, this is something you need to look at, the money. Officers are continually costing the city millions of dollars in payouts for mistakes that are made because this board does nothing to prevent it. Just think if you found just one killing out of policy, just one situation out of policy. I can tell you that 1421 is obviously being effective. We're down to only 2 officer-involved shootings this year, as opposed to 7. I have to believe that has something to do with that legislation. And if you as a board became effective, that number would continue to go down. I'm not really sure what else to say today, other than I'm just so disappointed that week after week we come here. Like Mr. Novick just said, we talk to you and you immediately vote as quickly as you can on whatever it is we speak to. And we speak intelligently, we speak mindfully, and you still just ignore it, and you take a vote, and you ratify whatever's put before you. You show us week after week just how ineffective and useless this is. The only thing it's effective at is its true role, the watchdog of white supremacy. That's what this Oversight Commission is, the watchdog of white supremacy.
Hi, everybody. Do you see the signature of the chief of police? It says Eric R. Moore. Is that an R or an M? Okay, let me explain this to you. That's an S that crosses the S. That's a T. That's Sancho Tina. That's his original name from Spain. His name is Chief Sancho Tina. He changed his name from Sancho Tina because his real dad left, and he took the name of his stepdad, which is Moore, but he's still signing his name Sancho Tina. He serves Spain. He doesn't serve us. That's your signature. That's an ST. That's what I see. You can't change your DNA. Idiot. I'll tell you, my mom and dad got up at 5:30 in the morning for 45 straight years, served the United States of America for 50 straight years. We came out of the dirt of Mississippi. They had to fish out of the river. They had to grow a garden. They had no money. They had to shit and piss in a bowl. And I keep hearing about white supremacy or white privilege, and we had none. I'm sorry, we didn't have any privilege. But we did not, okay? But we did not, sir. We did not. I just explained to you where my family came from, and this is what I mean. But I agree, though, what the LAPD is doing to shoot people and be told routinely. I mean, this is in 91. This is in 81. And I can't understand why it still goes on. Where there's so many people that got run off a boat and shot dead, and we get people like Charlie Beck or Chief Sancho Tina can walk around like they've dodged bullets and were like men and stuff, and that they're still killing people.
Herman's not here, so after that.
John Rios, Paula Miner, and Adam Smith.
Hi, John Avalos. I forgot to put John Avalos, my artist name. It's good to see you all. First of all, again, please hold your meetings in the evenings in the community. Let us know when they're going to be so we can organize, we can get the activists together, get the college students there. Number 2, the money. The parents in San Jose whose children have been killed are telling us that they're being charged a lot of money to get that information that the new law now allows us to have. So actually, people are being charged, families are being charged to get copies of that information. I mean, this commission should be totally up in arms about that and trying to resolve that. Nada, señora, nada. Figueroa Villa, no dices nada. You spoke for the first time last week after 3 years that I've attended these meetings. You spoke and you said something outstanding. You asked the question to the person doing the youth diversion task force. Didn't you remember last week? You asked the question to Captain Paul Espinosa from the LAPD Youth Juvenile Division. You asked him a question about his culturally relevance, his cultural relevance that he had in all of his stations. And you asked, what is that? 18 seconds. You asked, what is that cultural relevance? Did he really answer you? Did he answer? I don't think he answered what he meant by cultural relevance at these youth programs. You should be figuring out, you should be badgering him for information. What do you mean by cultural relevance? I bet you Michael Moore.
Paula Miner, followed by Adam Smith, Yvonne Michelle Autry, and Audrey George.
A genius question, senora, genius.
My public comment has to do with oversight. And we come to this commission because this commission is supposed to provide civilian oversight, is supposed to help LAPD serve the community. In the letter from the community that was sent to the mayor and sent to Chief Moore, at the end of the letter it said, we call on our city leaders to not just investigate this matter, and they were referring to the stops made by the Metro Division, but they also said to put in new protocols that would address this issue. And we think about our oversight group, they say city leaders. Who are city leaders? Our city leaders are elected officials, our mayor and our council. Well, we already know the degree of corruption that exists at that level. So then we look at the next level, which is supposed to be our commission here, and also LAPD, and I already talked about, the corruption and questionable activities in LAPD. But when we come to the commission, which is run by Steve Soberoff, we read what LAPD said was his first response before the mayor told him that they were going to check into Metro stops. His first response is he believes in the mission of Metro and the expansion of Metro without having additional facts. When the reporter asked him what did he think about the stops, he said, I believe in them and I think you should expand them, before the reporter could even give him more information. So when we come to this commission and we're looking for oversight, it is not here. In the city of Los Angeles, unfortunately and sadly for our community, our city is one of the most corrupt with our leadership in the nation.
Adam Smith.
Good morning again. Yeah, I don't have much to add. I just figure you all waste our time, so I figured I could at least waste a couple minutes of yours. You like that one? Yeah. Extra points? Do I get extra points for that? I do really think that it's worth, and I'm going to keep bringing it up until this dude is fired or whatever, but the fact that Nolte is in the position that he is makes no sense to me. And for someone that speaks to us seemingly earnest enough, I mean, you've been doing this for 30 years, 40 years, I'm sure you can lie if you want to, but for someone that talks about community trust and community outreach and community policing, but these are the things that, like Paula Miner said, these are the things that people are going to see, these are the things that stand out to people, not the barbecues and the Josh Rubenstein videos. No one gives a shit about barbecues if blatant corruption is what you're actually giving us.
So, sir, I 100% agree with you. I'm limited by state law as to what I can talk about personnel actions. Believe me.
Why was he ever hired?
Sir, I'm limited by state law. So this is, I don't make the law, but I'm charged with obeying it.
Okay. Is there state law against shooting people? All right, just making sure, because you've done that too. Will Chief Green give me the name? I wasn't here at the beginning of your chief's report. Will Chief Green give us the name of the person who was killed, or can you give it to me on Thursday? Steve, what's wrong? Is that Jimmy Buffett hat?
It's Wilfredo Hernandez. Last name Hernandez.
All right, thanks.
What's the first name? Wilfredo? Yes. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Yvonne Michelle Autry, followed by Audrey George, and I do have a card with no name on it.
So glad to see you, Professor Melina Abdullah. Yeah, we're still hoping that I understand that it's post-trial, but we know that this was injustice. Just as I'm followed constantly by SWAT team now, BID, this is ridiculous incrimination of those of us that are still alive to bring out and to expose the injustice in the system. I object to that incrimination. For the record, I object to the arming of the drones, which will no doubt be used to exterminate and further, exterminate those who are still alive that are speaking truth to power, predominantly black people, people of conscience. So, I want that on the record because I know it's just a matter of time before the drones will be armed. Specifically, there's a homeless woman whose belongings are repeatedly taken by the police. That's on the corner of 5th and San Pedro. She's not in violation, and so thank God she's able to replace her tent. But I want that on the record. Why is that happening? She's a black woman. Okay, just like my room is continually illegally entered by Mexican maintenance, as a TI, my neighbors. Okay, they cut master keys. They're using germ warfare, all types of sexual harassment as a TI, electronic weaponry being used. So this is on the record, continual harassments of individuals who have been labeled for extinction or, again, undesirable problems put in the trash. So I want that on the record. Also, relative to the 24-hour fitness shooting and the murder, about 22 years ago, I was falsely accused and then hospitalized in a 24-hour fitness. So I know that I'm a test specimen. So maybe that was a predecessor to the murders now. These were both black men. I'm a black woman. So again, on the record, we object to the extermination, the harassment, the continued subjugation, and the...
Next speaker, please.
Audrey George.
Audrey George, thank you. Audrey George.
I want to start out just by making a plea to all business owners, librarians, people protecting their own shit, white people protecting their property, who are so in love with the idea that the answer to every fucking problem is call 911. Get those cops out there. If folks are making you uncomfortable because they're black, because they're houseless, because possibly they might have mental health issues, there are other places to call, other people. Rely on your communities. Call mental health crisis lines. Do not call the cops. Never, never call the cops. It's very likely if you do, somebody will end up dead, and that will be on your conscience forever. I just want to mention once again in connection with Nolte, this 1421, it was interesting how the Police Protective League comes out and makes comments that, they don't want to release records retroactively because people probably wouldn't have lied on the stand if they knew that their records weren't going to be private. Well, perhaps Commander Nolte would not have lied about the time that he used force to injure or kill a civilian, because maybe it would have been in his public records that would be released later. This whole concept of how people would be better behaved, cops would be better behaved if only they had known that that people would be able to access those records. It says everything.
Okay, we have one card with no name on it, and we have a card for Melina Abdullah.
What does the card with no name on it look like?
You want to go ahead, Professor? Or no? Sir, is that your card?
I don't know.
One of you go ahead.
It's got a phrase, not a name.
What does the phrase say?
You need a name. We're not going to read just comments that are put on cards.
I mean, even the dang name caller person is trying to find a way to be corrupt. I mean, shit. Corruption knows no bounds, which I understand. And to my white brother, I wanted to do a political education in this moment for you, because you shouldn't have attacked Moore's ethnicity. His Spanish ethnicity is not the problem. The problem is when a Spanish brother becomes chief of police and watches other brown people die and do nothing about it. That's the real issue. That this system is so corrupt that it creates a color guard, if so you will. Puts brown and black people in particular places so that the system can continue to kill black and brown people and still get away with it. That's the issue that we're up against. A brown man sitting here in office, but yet apathetic and desensitized to other brown people being killed. That's a major problem. Because I promise you, if little Susie gets killed by this black sister, all right? Little Dorothy gets killed by these brown and black folks sitting across the hall. We saw in Minneapolis where a white Australian woman was killed, and that black police officer went to jail so fast that almost, got shit. The process can move so damn fast to hold a police officer goddamn accountable. That's the system we're up against. That Moore is here to uphold white supremacy, not here to protect and to serve. You got to understand the demon that we're up against. That the demon can, yes, possess black and brown people, and yes, take those same black and brown people and rubber stamp our deaths day after day. I've seen that black brother over there do it like it was nothing, like it was a drink of water to his ass, to criminalize other black people. That's the system that we're up against. And yes, go back to community meetings. Y'all asses need to hear more truth from the community. You need to hear the groans and the groans from the community. You don't need to be hidden behind these little forms.
Next speaker, please. Thank you, sir.
Children, as they talk about, don't kill my mother and my father.
Thank you.
You need to hear from sisters and brothers that you all have killed and murdered in the name of protect and to serve. You need to be hearing from students and hearing from those in those communities.
Next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Melina Abdullah.
Sir, will you take your seat, please? Your time is up. Please, thank you.
Mr. President, the speaker is disrupting the meeting from
I'm
continuing.
going to, we're either. Okay.
That's what disrupting is.
Okay. Are you finished now?
When will y'all motherfuckers be finished from killing us?
Okay, next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Melina Abdullah, and we do have one late card.
Okay, we'll take
from
it.
Ms. Cooper.
You have one late card, you said?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Off, but we did say that if you don't do right, ancestors and the Creator are going to descend on you. So I heard that you're not feeling well. So maybe you should change your behavior and think about who you serve, and maybe you'll be blessed and not cursed. I want to lift up the pledge that you've made repeatedly to transparency. I want to remind you of what the people did in passing Senate Bill 1421, and we're about to pass another bill, the use of force bill, that'll prohibit you all from killing us and hold accountable the police who do, right? So that's coming. Assembly Bill 392, mark my words, will also be passed because the power rests with the people, yes? I want to ask this commission, who is supposed to represent the people, why you have not weighed in on the police union's attempt to get around Senate Bill 1421. Why have you not issued an opinion? Why have you not weighed in and said, yes, there should be transparency? Why have you not said, we want people to know what's happening so that we can actually build trust? I think it's because you know that the police are not trustworthy, and so there is no opportunity to build trust. But if you think there is, it would seem like you would weigh in and say Senate Bill 1421 should be fully enforced. And yes, we have a right to records before January 2019. It's really important that you do that. And regardless of what you do, the court's going to rule in the favor of the police. It's going to rule in the favor of Waukesha Wilson and Grishario Mack and Eric Rivera and all of those other names that we call. Yes? Yes. Ashe.
Ms. Cooper? Okay. And we have no other cards, sir? We're now in closed session. We do have one card for closed session, 5A1. We have Michael Novick.
This is 5A1. It's the closed session item. It's the discipline and public employee performance evaluation for 2 sergeants and 7 police officers that were in some way involved in the law enforcement related injury of Jay Pisano. And again, the first comment I want to make is you need to understand that these are systemic. If you're looking at 7, 10, 12 police officers every week that were involved in incidents, you're not evaluating just those individual officers. You have to understand that it's a systemic issue with law enforcement, not just the LAPD. Stop grinning at people in the audience and look at me, Mr. Soboroff. Second question I want to ask related to this is, was Commander Nolte involved in the Force Investigation Division that's resulted in the case being brought before you today? And if so, I think you need to reconsider. I think that when a district attorney prosecuting individuals discovered that there was perjured testimony coming from one of the people involved in the investigation, whole classes of cases have been thrown out. So I think you need to look back at all the cases that you have dealt with and rubber stamped and approved and found within policy in the investigations conducted by Commander Nolte of the Force Investigation Division and review them all. And I think you should start with the case of Waukesha Wilson. But you should consider in this one, again, the fact that this is a systemic problem with law enforcement, that people are being killed, injured, beaten, shot. It's not the act of the individual officer alone. It's the charge and the mandate that you give to the police department to enforce and uphold a system of white supremacy, settler colonialism, class exploitation, poverty and criminalization of poverty and criminalization of people for the badge and incidents of slavery, which still exist in this society long after the abolition of slavery.
And there are no other public comment cards. The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss item number 5A1 in accordance with Government Code 54957. Commissioners has concluded its work in closed session. We are back in open session. In closed session, item number 5A1 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. Mr. President, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second. All in favor? 3-0. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Way to go, everybody.